Imagine a small nation making a bold decision, one that it believed could inspire change across the globe. Lithuania made headlines when it became the first European country to officially recognize Taiwan, defying China's strict stance on the island. The move earned praise from democratic nations, but behind the applause lay an unexpected price. One that has left Lithuania's economy in turmoil and its government grappling with a tough choice: rebuild relations with China or face the risk of economic isolation. How did Lithuania get to this point, and is there a way forward? What sparked the diplomatic fallout with China, and what did Lithuania hope to achieve? When Lithuania decided to support Taiwan, it was seen as a stand for democracy and sovereignty. But China didn't take kindly to this. In response, Beijing quickly imposed harsh sanctions, cutting off Lithuanian imports and terminating crucial trade agreements. According to the New York Times, Lithuanian exports to China plummeted by more than 90% in just a few months, throwing the nation's economy into crisis. China's Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, warned that any nation underestimating China's position on Taiwan would face severe repercussions. For Lithuania, those repercussions came swiftly, with the loss of a major trading partner sending shockwaves through the economy. As businesses struggled and workers faced uncertainty, the question loomed: was this diplomatic gamble worth the cost? Lithuania's leaders framed their recognition of Taiwan as a bold step in defense of democratic values. They hoped that by setting an example, other nations would follow suit, challenging China's growing authoritarian influence. Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis called it an opportunity to stand up for the principles that democracies should champion. But the reality turned out to be far more complicated. The anticipated wave of international support didn't materialize as quickly as Lithuania had hoped, and the economic backlash from China was more severe than anticipated. As analyst Sarah Wilson from the Financial Times noted, Lithuania had underestimated the economic leverage China holds and overestimated Europe's willingness to confront Beijing. The fallout affected multiple sectors, from high-tech industries to agriculture, with businesses struggling to survive under the pressure of lost markets and trade disruptions. But did Lithuania expect the West to come to its rescue? Did it anticipate that the EU would step in with economic or political backing? Initially, Lithuania believed that European nations would support its position on Taiwan. According to Politico Europe, Lithuania expected moral support to translate into tangible backing, but the reality was different. While there was diplomatic solidarity, European giants like Germany and France, who have deep economic ties with China, were hesitant to take a more aggressive stance. As EU analyst Robert Bierman pointed out, while Lithuania's allies voiced support, very few were willing to jeopardize their own economic interests by confronting China head-on. This diplomatic divide left Lithuania in a vulnerable position, facing the wrath of a global superpower with limited support from its European counterparts. The economic consequences were far-reaching. Prior to the fallout, Lithuania's exports to China were valued at over 300 million EUR annually. That revenue, vital for a small economy, all but disappeared, creating a financial earthquake. Industries that relied on trade with China, such as laser technology, agriculture, and manufacturing, were hit hard. Many companies now face layoffs or are struggling to stay afloat, and the ripple effect is being felt throughout the workforce. The laser technology sector, a cornerstone of Lithuania's high-tech exports, was particularly hard hit. Once a leading supplier of laser equipment to China, the sector saw its market virtually vanish, leading to significant job losses and lost revenue. In agriculture, Lithuania's meat and grain exports to China came to a standstill, directly impacting local farmers and suppliers who depended on those markets. For citizens in Lithuania, the impact is personal. Small business owners who had spent years cultivating relationships in China now find themselves facing an uncertain future. One factory owner told Reuters, "We've been left out in the cold. Without the Chinese market, we're struggling just to stay open." So, how does the public in Lithuania view this decision? A recent poll conducted by the Baltic Times revealed that around 55% of Lithuanians believe their government should prioritize economic stability over taking a more confrontational stance with China. This divided opinion reflects the growing concern about the consequences of the government's bold move. While Lithuania remains steadfast in its support for Taiwan, the reality is that the country is now facing the consequences of its decision. The question remains: will Lithuania's gamble pay off in the long run, or will the cost prove too high to bear? And what does the future hold for a small country caught between the ideals of democracy and the pressure of global economic realities? Lithuania's story is a cautionary tale of the risks involved in challenging a global superpower, and it leaves the world wondering whether other nations will be brave enough to follow Lithuania's lead, or if the economic consequences will be too great for them to bear. Currently, 45% of the public supports the government's stance on prioritizing sovereignty and democratic values over economic convenience. One protester in Vilnius shared a sentiment that resonates with many, telling Euronews, "We cannot overlook human rights, but we also can't ignore the importance of our economy. There must be a compromise." For many Lithuanians, the debate is no longer just about abstract principles. It's about securing jobs, economic stability, and the future of their nation. With mounting domestic pressures, the question arises, why is Lithuania now reaching out to China? What has changed in its approach? In the face of significant economic struggles, Lithuania's leadership has begun quietly signaling a shift in tone, suggesting a willingness to ease tensions. Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis recently implied a more pragmatic approach, saying, "While our values remain paramount, we must also ensure the long-term prosperity of our nation." This shift marks a growing recognition that balancing political ideals with economic reality is becoming increasingly urgent. For Lithuania, finding a way to advance that preserves democratic principles while addressing economic needs is the current challenge. But does this mean Lithuania is abandoning its core values, or is it simply adjusting to economic necessities? The question of balancing ideology with pragmatism is not unique to Lithuania, though the stakes here feel particularly high. Economist Dr. John Lahn from Cambridge University shared with Bloomberg, "Smaller nations often face this tough decision, whether to stick to their principles or make compromises to survive. Lithuania's leaders are now finding that these priorities are not as distinct as they once seemed. Talks about potential trade negotiations with China have emerged, suggesting that Lithuania could cautiously re-engage with China without compromising its position on Taiwan. The idea of a more pragmatic approach has sparked debate across Lithuania. Some view it as a sensible middle ground, an opportunity to revive the economy without fully abandoning democratic values. Others, however, see it as a retreat from the principles that the country fought to uphold. As Lithuania reassesses its position, Europe's larger economies appear to be heading in the opposite direction, strengthening their ties with China instead of following Lithuania's example. Countries like Germany, France, and Italy continue to deepen their economic relationships with China, driven by trade interests. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz recently stated that economic relations with China are essential to Europe's recovery. This sentiment reflects a broader European trend where economic advantages often take precedence over ideological concerns. Lithuania, in contrast, finds itself increasingly isolated, as larger economies prioritize trade while smaller nations like Lithuania bear the brunt of ideological stances. Alina Polakova, an analyst from the European Policy Institute, remarked that Europe's approach to China is deeply fragmented. Larger nations pursue economic gains, while smaller nations, like Lithuania, are left to face the consequences on their own. As Lithuania grapples with its isolation, is this the perfect moment for a diplomatic reset? The timing may be critical. China, facing its own economic slowdown due to trade tensions with the US and the lingering effects of the pandemic, is rethinking its international strategy. Beijing is reportedly exploring ways to rebuild relationships with countries it previously sanctioned, seeking to stabilize its trade networks amid global economic uncertainty. For Lithuania, this could present a unique opportunity. Having endured considerable economic setbacks, the Lithuanian government is now signaling openness to talks, aware that improved relations with China could relieve some of the pressure it faces domestically. Officials in Lithuania have acknowledged that a thaw in relations might help stabilize key industries and strengthen the nation's economy. Could this be the beginning of a more pragmatic approach to foreign policy for Lithuania? Only time will tell. While Lithuania continues to show support for Taiwan, it faces a critical challenge, ensuring the well-being of its own citizens. A government spokesperson recently emphasized to Reuters that the country's focus is on resilience, balancing principle with pragmatism. However, Lithuania's situation is far more complex than merely navigating relations with China. It must also manage its relationship with Russia, which introduces significant risks. Lithuania, sharing borders with Russia and being close to Belarus, is strategically positioned at the crossroads of Eastern European geopolitics. Historically, it has aligned closely with NATO and the EU, particularly as a counterbalance to Russian influence in the Baltic region. But with Russia and China increasingly forming an alliance on the world stage, Lithuania finds itself in a delicate balancing act. Challenging China could harm ties with its powerful eastern neighbor, adding more pressure to an already complicated situation. Dr. Christina Spohr, a geopolitical expert at the London School of Economics, discussed Lithuania's predicament in The Guardian, noting that the country's geographic vulnerability makes it impossible to abandon its Western alliances. However, antagonizing China could heighten Lithuania's vulnerability to Russia. This precarious position forces the nation to reassess its strategies, not out of fear, but necessity. Leaders recognize that maintaining diplomatic flexibility is crucial in navigating a world that is becoming ever more polarized. The pressing question is whether China will be open to reconciliation with Lithuania, or if it will see any outreach as a sign of weakness. Experts are divided. Some believe China's history suggests it might use Lithuania's overture as an opportunity to reassert its dominance, possibly demanding concessions in exchange for any reset. However, others point out the potential economic aspect. China, increasingly focused on stability, could be swayed by clear economic benefits from a restored relationship with Lithuania. Dr. Chen Shi, a Chinese economist, shared with Bloomberg that if Lithuania can offer a tangible economic advantage, Beijing may be inclined to reconcile. Given China's own economic challenges, this could prove mutually beneficial. However, any agreement would likely come with stipulations, such as Lithuania refraining from further support of Taiwan, or perhaps a symbolic acknowledgement of China's stance on territorial integrity. Lithuania's capacity to navigate these demands will be pivotal in determining the outcome. Should reconciliation occur, what would it mean for Lithuania's economy? A return to trade with China could prove transformative. The Financial Times reports that such a move could boost Lithuania's GDP by up to 2%, offering a much-needed economic lift after the sanctions. Sectors like tech, agriculture, and manufacturing, which once thrived on Chinese demand, could see a resurgence. Dr. Michael L. Chen, an expert on EU-China trade relations, noted that Lithuania's economy is heavily export-driven. Rebuilding ties with China could stabilize key sectors and restore investor confidence, potentially saving thousands of jobs. For a small nation like Lithuania, this could also translate into better public services, infrastructure projects, and even wage growth. Lithuania's situation provides valuable lessons for other countries in similar circumstances. Nations like Australia, New Zealand, and several Southeast Asian countries are closely watching Lithuania's experience as they navigate their own complex relationships with China. Dr. Anna Hurd-Leah, a political economist, warns that smaller economies must weigh the risks of taking independent actions without guaranteed support from allies. Lithuania's struggle highlights the economic toll of standing firm on moral grounds without sufficient backing. Looking beyond Lithuania, the potential reset with China could offer broader insights into European diplomacy. If Lithuania successfully rekindles its relationship with China, it could set a precedent for how smaller European nations approach their diplomatic balancing acts. Europe is under pressure from both the US and China, each vying for influence on the continent. A successful reconciliation between Lithuania and China might embolden other countries to pursue pragmatic economic strategies, without abandoning their values entirely. Marco Zan, a senior analyst with the European Council on Foreign Relations, believes that Lithuania's path will be closely scrutinized, as it could provide a model for other nations seeking to engage with China while maintaining their core principles. As Europe grapples with an array of global challenges, Lithuania's potential reconciliation could provide a viable roadmap for smaller economies trying to maintain their autonomy in an increasingly polarized world. However, the fundamental question remains: is Lithuania's shift towards pragmatism a necessary evolution, or is it abandoning its core democratic values? This dilemma resonates beyond Lithuania, as it reflects the broader struggle of small nations caught between economic survival and the desire to uphold ideals that define their identity. As Lithuania contemplates its future, its decisions could not only reshape its own destiny, but also influence the broader European approach to navigating the competing pressures of global superpowers. The unfolding chapter of Lithuania's diplomatic journey may offer crucial lessons for other nations in similar predicaments, as they navigate the complexities of international relations in an era defined by powerful and competing interests. We hope you found this analysis insightful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out another video now featured on your screen.